Do stay-at-home dads exist? Well, in this conversation with brilliant LinkedIn influencer and dad blogger, John Adams, he suggests, well, yes, they do. But with that comes a lot of stigma, a lot of issues, because John is the primary caregiver for his kids. He's had to navigate that schoolyard stigma, the attitudes, risks, perceptions that go with it, and even questions of, are you redundant? Have you lost your job? You can't work? Is your wife dead? All things that he's been asked and mentioned, because that is the stigma that comes with being the primary caregiver dad in a modern world. We have a real good chat around this, and John's kids are also slightly older. So for dads who've got older kids, listen to John in this conversation, because we share lots of thoughts, comments, ideas around what gaps there are, what support should be available, and what's there to help you in the first case. So let's jump into the chat with John, and we'll see you soon. Welcome along. My name is Rob Taylor from Dads in Business, and I'm with a very special guest today. Firstly, he's a dad of two. He's the editor of dadbloguk.com. And for the purpose of this conversation today, he is also the primary caregiver for his kids. And I thought it'd be a really good contributing factor to the video series that we're trying to do, because his kids are also slightly older, I think, John. So morning, John. Give us a little overview of who you are, what you do, and where you come from, as the old Cilla Black used to say.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for asking me to do this. So yes, I'm John Adams. I'm a dad of two. Helen, who is 12, heading towards 13. Izzy, who is 9. Since 2011, I have actually been both the kids' main carer as my wife, who has worked full-time and provided financially for the family. My employment status has changed during that time. Sometimes I've worked part-time, sometimes I haven't worked. Throughout most of that time, however, as you have said, I have had a sort of side hustle as a blogger, social media influencer, writing dadbloguk.com, which I just have to casually drop in there and say has been UK's #1 dad blog 4 years in a row, listed by Video. So it's not that I intended it to be this way, but it's quite a high-profile role at times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes the best things happen by accident, don't they? And I think the work that you do on that surely suggests that you've stumbled on quite an important topic. And I think we were chatting just before we came on, weren't we, that pre-social media, none of this conversation was really happening. So I think if you can lead the charge on that, it's going to encourage people to raise their hands, lurk on the blog. Those who don't want to be publicly contributing, I think it's a great thing you're doing. So keep it up, and congratulations on it being multi-award winning. I think it's fantastic. John, how did you find in the early days being the primary caregiver for kids?
It was not what I expected. I actually thought that I was going to be the butt of jokes by men, and I thought, and this was maybe a bit presumptuous of me, but I thought I would be sort of at least welcomed by mums, women, basically. I sort of found the reverse was true, actually. The moment my wife and I sort of took the decision that I would concentrate on family and home, I had a phone call from a friend of mine saying, "Hey, John, how are you going to make this work? Because my wife and I think, doing the same." And there's another story I like to tell. A guy called Starey George, the builder, who was working on our house at the time. Old guy, stereotypical builder, roll-ups, chocolate hobnobs, Radio 2, you got the idea. In his 60s, close to retirement, and I was always at home with my daughter, and I thought at some point I'm going to have to explain to this guy why I'm always at home with her, because he's probably wondering. And I told him, that I'm a main care. At that point, I was working part-time. I sort of said, it's me that looks after my wife works full-time. He just stopped what he was doing, and he stared into the middle distance, and he said, "You know what? I wish I could do what you've been doing." I didn't see my kids growing up because I was just working all the time. Very, very sad to hear father from an older generation saying that type of thing. Um, so that's that's the sort of male women. Some very welcoming, some were very accepting, but actually, to some women, a man in my position is a bit of a threat. Actually, because and it's very, you read what is said in various academic studies and so on. Motherhood confers on you a status that you do not get from fatherhood. And when a man comes along with children who are actually well behaved, attending school, doing all the things that kids are, you are a bit of a threat. Like there's a bit of a threat to their thinking, their status as a mother. So can't honestly tell you I was always welcomed by mums, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine the playground chatter or the odd hush as this man walks into the playground with his kids, and then the backs turn to their little clusters and stuff, because it's a strange thing, isn't it? Are you seeing it become more common? I mean, I try and drop my kids are slightly younger than yours. My oldest is 7.5. My youngest is 3.25. I'll try and drop the two of them off who go to school at least 2 or 3 times a week. And I do notice, I think, quite a few dads there. Don't get me wrong, it's predominantly women still. But definitely, and I don't know how this plays out for you, but we often refer to the should gremlins, and they always came from predominantly women, where it should be, Rob should be slinging them. Rob should be at work. Rob should be at home. Rob should be doing more of this. Rob should be doing that. But that's playing into the typical role of a dad. And you've upset that rhythm, and others like you have upset that rhythm. So how, did it take some time to, I guess, find your position in that environment?
I think ultimately, I said it was in the nursery years, because we didn't take our oldest had been at nursery full time, 5 days a week till for about 18 months thereabouts, until she was 18 months old. Sorry. Nurseries are commercial ventures run for profit, basically. That's the brutal truth. They tend to have longer hours. Men are more frequently seen at nurseries because of that. And I think for nursery staff, and maybe for mums, it's not such a big thing. When my eldest daughter started at school, and it was just the way the thing went. It wasn't quite what we planned. She happened to start at school where none of her nursery friends were. So she was starting all over again.
Wow.
I then had to re-establish myself with a group. And if you think about basically what happens with National Childbirth Trust, Parentcraft, whichever, certainly NCT is not an organisation I have a lot of time for. I mean, I think it's changed over the past 10 years, but it's a hothouse for encouraging female support and female friendship, and the add-ons where the barbecues where men come and drink bad beer like Budweiser, there's sort of an add-on,
that
are nice to have. There's not sort of a focus like you've got to have the dads involved in. That's my experience. Okay, I mean maybe things have changed now, but what you get is women from before the child is born with these parenting groups encouraged to have these really tight social networks. These continue at nursery, they continue at the school gate. And then if you parachute in a father such as myself, he's then got to somehow wangle his way into those social groups. And it's a very important point to make is that actually when men are stay-at-home dads, or they are the primary caregivers for their children, it rarely happens from the moment the child is born, because if mum is breastfeeding, she will often take those few months of shared parental leave to continue breastfeeding, or there'll be a divorce, separation, widowhood, redundancy. There is something that often throws men into that stay-at-home dad role. So those female social groups, they're like that, and then you as a dad have to kind of make your way into them, and it is quite difficult. I mean, I sort of got around it by volunteering in my daughter's school. I would go in one day a week, and there would always be another mum there also volunteering, so it sort of got us chatting. I was able to wonder my way in. Despite that, though, I did face some very interesting questions. So so you must be what was it? I was asked if I'd been made redundant or if I was between jobs or something. And another time I said, "Oh, so you're a single parent? Your wife is dead or divorced or something," which is quite odd because I do actually wear a wedding ring. That question came out of the blue. So yes, there were some interesting. I mean, a great. Although she was joking, it did actually make me laugh. Both my wife and I went to a barbecue organised by, interestingly, a dad at that particular school. And we both turned up, and this woman, she did have a great sense of humour. She turned to my wife and she said, so you're his wife. I thought you were dead. Which I did find that quite funny, but it just shows you.
Did your wife find that funny as well?
She did, actually.
Oh, yeah. Good.
But it just shows the type of thing you do come up on. But just to take it back for a moment, the very interesting point you make about you do see a lot of dads dropping kids off and picking them up. The challenge I put to you, Rob, is how many of them are there twice a day, 5 days a week? Right. The number.
Well, I wouldn't know because I'm not there twice a day, 5 days a week. Yeah.
I mean, again, I want to go back to what I said with the previous question. That is still a sign of success. You know, the fact that men are now taking their kids to school. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. You know.
Now, I work for myself, and I guess I have built in that time and permission to myself to drop my kids off. I'm sure those in employment have different pressures where they can't do that. But I mean, you said something really interesting where it's like disasters happened. So therefore, you are the primary caregiver. Oh, you've been made redundant. Oh, you're divorced. Oh, your wife's dead. Oh, isn't he brave? That sort of perception. Whereas I assume you did this wholly by choice.
I did. I mean, I wasn't very happy in the job that I had at the time. When I left full-time employment, and my wife, she just had great career potential, and it was a brutally practical decision. I mean, when I took it was just you know, we weren't happy with our child being in nursery full-time. And interestingly, we just thought that we both had to work full-time to cover the mortgage, when actually, when we sat down and did the calculation, I've got this, we did get the calculations a bit wrong. I mean, I couldn't say there weren't financial ramifications. But I actually left full-time work, and then, as I say, I did actually go. Initially, I moved to part-time work. But there was a very interesting thing, was that I never referred to myself as a stay-at-home dad at that point. Other people referred to me as a stay-at-home dad.
So you had a label put on you.
I couldn't shake it off, so I just had to roll with it. And even though I was actually working part-time, but eventually I did actually, give up working altogether for a brief while.
So it sounds like there's a real sort of, there's an opportunity, obviously, and you're grasping that opportunity. There's others like you are to be that, to go against stereotype, if you like, and be the primary caregiver. But isn't there an opportunity for the schoolyard moms to give them a collective, to also welcome that and encourage that to happen more, and not have this sense of dread, or like this stranger's walked into our pub and, oh my goodness, this feels a bit weird? Shouldn't they welcome that and encourage that, rather than, because that's ultimately what's going to lead to more workplace equality as well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is a very important point that I would make, is that although I've generally sort of always focused on speaking up for positive fatherhood and for positive masculinities, and I purposefully use the plural there, masculinities, because I think it's a spectrum. if we are never going to get equality for women in the workplace unless we actually have equality for men on the domestic front, and we are a million miles away from the latter. I wouldn't suggest for a second that we have equality for women in the workplace, because we don't. But the focus has been on breaking down those barriers for women, which if you think about the way women were, treated as recently as the 1980s. I mean, you've only got to go back. You've not got to go back that far even to find. Well, sorry, you've got to go beyond the 1980s. But I'm old enough to have spoken to women who have never owned a house because banks wouldn't even give women a mortgage. So we, I'm not saying the focus was in the wrong place historically.
Yeah.
But I do think that when it comes to gender equality, there is actually an argument that we've got to look. I hate the word holistically.
I know, yeah, but it fits here.
It fits. So yes, there is a role for schoolyard mums to be, and obviously I'm using that very generically. There are those schoolyard mums who are absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
But I mean, when my daughters moved to a different primary school, they did move to a different one a couple of years ago. The parents' night out was organised one Christmas. Christmas, this was just before COVID, actually. I expressed an interest in attending, and I received a message back from the PTA rep saying, "Just to warn you," great choice of words, "a man has never attended these events before." Now, actually, the PTA needs to take a long, hard look at itself and ask, why haven't men attended? Shouldn't men be encouraged? Are you putting them off? And although this is a bit of a, I think the other thing that I've got to say, Rob, is I am in a heterosexual relationship. And I think we have always got to bear in mind that there are actually gay couples out there of both genders who are raising children. And so things that I call the challenges I've faced, I think it is, we're in a world now where it's absolutely wrong not to put your hand up and say, please, let's not forget the gay couples out there. I think gay couples probably have different
there's a whole new wave of challenges there, isn't there, as well? Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I was once at an event where at Oxford Brookes University, speaking about the challenges of being the main carer for your kids to a group of sort of health and social care professionals. And there was actually a lesbian woman in the audience, and it sort of came to the Q&A session. She sort of said at the end, of all the people who have actually spoken here, it's you, John, and she really sort of pointed that I feel I've got the most in common with. And we had a great chat afterwards. It's just really interesting.
I bet you were worried where that were going. It's you, John. With What's me? What's me? Just on that PTA sort of thing, that is interesting. There's got to be a role there, hasn't there? It's like you're trying to infiltrate this secret club almost, like, and excuse me, I'm trying to be inclusive, I'm trying to engage, I'm trying to do this, and you're telling me I can't do it. You're warning me that men have never attended this. That's not right. If that was the other way around,
yeah,
and it was a workplace and said, we must warn you, women have never done this job before, we'd be shot down.
You would be,
rightly so. But
yes,
it's easy to make the comparisons, isn't it? That it can work both ways.
It can work both ways. This is where I would throw down a challenge to fathers. Now, I haven't been involved with the PTA for some time, but I was actually on my kids' old school PTA. I was only there for a term. I just got caught up with it, which is a pathetic excuse, but and actually that PTA, amazingly, had one dad as chairing it for a while, and then another dad actually chaired it for a while. Now, it's very rare for dads to actually get involved with PTA. So there are reasons for that. I think firstly, they're maybe not always all that welcoming to dads. But dads, how many of you would actually consider getting involved with your school PTA? And if not, why not? And the other thing I'd say is school WhatsApp groups. Men, there is an imperative on you to get on them. Now, you may not be initially invited, but
infiltrated your way in.
Yeah. If men are going to be accepted, then there is an obligation on guys to actually get, and it's the PTA who generally run the Facebook pages and run the WhatsApp groups. And PTAs are great for asking for dads to volunteer to run the school disco or to build a garden shed or something, those sort of stereotypical male power tool kind of roles. But guys, what are you doing to actually get involved with the PTA? Compare the makeup of a PTA to your average selection of school governors. Oh boy, dads will get involved with the school governor, but why not on the PTA?
It's an interesting challenge. I was thinking then when you mentioned about the Facebook, WhatsApp group. There's a similar Facebook group up where we are in Sheffield, and for our school, and it must be 95% women. It is, and it makes you feel awkward contributing to it. Yeah,
no, it can do. I mean, actually, I reckon on my kids' Facebook page, I'm probably the only dad I can actually recall ever posting to it. Again, the kids' old primary school, someone set up the Facebook page, or a PTA backed Facebook page, and it was called Mums of X School. There was one dad there actually who was he was a full-time working dad, unlike me, but he was also the main carer for his kids, and he shot straight back. If this is a page for mums where us dads meant to post, within the hour it did actually changed its name. But it's a very interesting comparison, because obviously, like I say, that old school, as you can probably tell from the way I'm talking about it, there possibly was more dad engagement with it than the present school. So you have got to be careful. It's not like it's all doom and gloom. There are pockets of good practice or better practice. So
because I was doing some digging as we were chatting before we hit record, and it's not, while the numbers seem low, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, it's not unheard of for there to be dads as primary caregivers. The stats I've seen suggest that 1.2% of dads are primary caregivers. Where do you sit with that? Is that accurate?
No. There's we were chatting about this when we came on air, and I don't mean to promote my own blog, so forgive me, but I'm just going to say, if anybody
please do
this detail, I have actually written, I mean, it's a few years ago, but I liaised with the Office of National Statistics. I did actually produce a blog post, which I think, if you do a search on my blog for stay-at-home dads officially don't exist, I think it's called. So the Office of National Statistics obviously produces data every 3 months relating to British society, and they collect figures for the number of men who are economically inactive because they are looking after family and home. Mirror image, the Office of National Statistics does also collect data on the number of women who are economically inactive because of family and home. Now, you've got to listen to those words very carefully. You can be economically inactive because you're looking after family and home because you are so wealthy you do not need to work. You can be looking after older relatives. You might not even have children. So there are a number. So whatever your position is, you will be in those figures. They are not necessarily primary caregivers for children. And the other important bit is the economically inactive bit. Okay. So I may have been comfortable for a while calling myself a stay-at-home dad. Excuse me. But like virtually every other parent, there has never been a time where I have been 100% economically inactive. So I would never have appeared in those figures. Now, those figures for men are around about 250,000 economically inactive men because they're looking after family. So we actually don't know, because those men could be in a variety of situations, as I've outlined already. Wealthy, looking after a spouse, whatever. Or they could be looking after children economically active. There could actually be a veritable army of 3 million men who are like me, who are the primary caregivers for their children, but because they do a few hours work in the local charity shop, or they bake a few cakes and
sell them at the PTA meeting or something.
Yeah, something like that. They would be economically active, so they don't fit in those figures. So we do not know. And the other important thing to stress is that applies to women as well. So we have no idea how many women.
But I mean, in the day and age where this gig economy is kicking off so massively, and everyone's got, you mentioned it, they're on side hustles. Mm-hmm. Why aren't we measuring that?
It's a really good question. I mean, actually, I have got some sympathy for the Office of National Statistics, because how do you actually define a stay-at-home parent, be they a mum or a dad? Is the parent who works in that charity shop for a few hours not a stay-at-home parent? Of course they are, but where does it apply for, say, a divorced parent, be they mum or dad, who has the children for 2 weeks every 2 weeks? Mm-hmm. It does start, I mean, or for step parents, it does actually start to get.
Yeah, I guess the definition of it might be there's going to be hurdles wherever, but I guess as a simple starting point, they could say, if you are in a couple living in the same house, who is the primary caregiver? And we change it from, it's not stay at home, but the language could be changed to primary caregiver. I can define that easily. That's my missus in my case. It's you in your case. We can easily define that ourselves.
No, you're right. I mean, there is actually very good questions to how, should we change our language to define things differently? Because the question it leaves me asking is, what the hell is the government building policy on? It's arguably being built on foundations of sand. We just don't know. So yeah, I think you are actually right.
And I guess as well, there's so much work done to engage women equality, as you've rightly said, absolutely so. But that's all about getting into work and workplace. Is there any work out there to support primary caregiving dads?
Interesting question. I mean, there's academic study into this. It is an area that is. Give me 1 second, actually. Hang on. I've got. Where the hell is it? Right.
You're the first guest to run off for a live prop there, John.
Right, there you go. You want to read this? Sharing Care, Equal and Primary Care of Fathers and Early Years Parenting by Rachel Brooks and Paul Hodkinson.
Now, I assume that's not a light read. I assume that's is it quite academic in its language?
It's not too bad, actually. It is. As we were saying earlier, I mean, it does focus on the early years of childhood, and it's from the guys at the University of Surrey. Although it's published by Bristol University Press. It is now out in paperback. I mean, the hardback was about 70 quid a copy, but it is now out in paperback. So that type of thing is now being produced. People are kind of looking into it, but I think there are some gaping holes. I mean, the one that springs to my mind with shared parental leave, although the numbers of men actually taking shared parental leave for a long time are small, there are a lot of schemes out there to help women returners back into work. Now, some of these schemes, I mean, there's one called Successful Mums that I know of. Oh gosh, there's another one, a really famous one. But oh gosh, I've forgotten the name of it. So famous, I've forgotten the name of it. Maybe it's COVID brain. I had COVID a couple of weeks back.
Oh, yeah, goodness. Yeah.
if we are going to try and get to that point whereby we have equality in the workplace, we have equality in the home, where is the support to help men when they come off the end of that conveyor belt at the end of those primary caregiving days? How are we going to help them retrain? How are we going to help them sort of get back into the workplace, upskill, whatever? Me, myself, and I've gone drastic, actually. I mean, I won't go through my whole educational background because it's complicated, but I have taken the decision. I've got a few ideas. I don't want to say exactly what I'm planning to do, but I'm thinking in a few years' time, I'm looking to go into education, not in a traditional route, but in a sort of non-traditional education route. So I'm actually studying with the Open University at the minute, with the aim of then doing some postgraduate study, because I didn't actually do a degree when I was younger. I did a different qualification. And I have to say publicly, I am very, very outspoken about the higher education system in the United Kingdom. I do not think that we should, sorry to use a conveyor belt analogy again, kids should not be bunged into university at the age of 18. I'm going to swear, it's a fucking ridiculous system.
You've just scuppered my YouTube algorithm there, John.
Oh, have I? Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll say that again without it. It's a ridiculous.
Yeah, that's all right.
We get. So I'm going to go on the mini rant, then I'll get back to the subject. Mm-hmm. Kids leave home at 18, and then we stack them up in cheap, high-density housing, and we ply them full of cheap booze in a culture that encourages heavy drinking. We leave them there for 3 years to pickle themselves, and they come home after 3 years with £45,000 worth of debt and tell them that they are a failure if they haven't bought their own house by the time they are 30. And added to that, for an awful lot of roles these days, you have to serve your time doing sort of a year or 18 months in either unpaid or poorly paid internships before you even get an entry-level job. The whole system is utterly broken. So I'm a big advocate of lifelong learning. When it's the right time for you to actually study and do a degree, if that's even the right thing, do it. Otherwise, look at T-levels, look at apprenticeships. Degrees are not the answer to
it. Absolutely. I mean, I think in support of you on that. I think there's so many. I need to be careful because people do these degrees, but almost like throwaway degrees that it's there's no actual real value to them because everyone's got them. So it's just, well, I was as clogged up as I was here. So everyone's now here. And I think unless you want to be a doctor or a historian or a medic or something that requires a specific and intense level of learning like that, business studies, all right, why not go and start a business? And then you can learn a business and you won't be saddled with that much debt. What's the worst that can happen? Start another one. Yeah. And go again. But I guess it's easier for me to say, having gone through redundancy twice, and that's what triggered me into go and work for myself. It's hard to break that cycle yourself.
Yeah.
Because to speak out against the traditional, go to school, go to college, go to uni, get a job, retire. It's hard to jump off that conveyor belt, isn't it?
I suppose I jumped off it a decade ago, didn't I? I mean, interestingly, though, I did a high national diploma in media studies and journalism. Now, media studies is possibly the worst you can do. But I know that my course lecturers, they had to fight tooth and nail to get the word journalism added onto it, because the qualification awarding body, they were like, no, you must call this a media studies course. Actually, the higher national diploma I did, which is 2 years of study, I can't deny it, served me supremely well. Supremely well. I think it's part of the reason why I question the need for 3 years of study for a degree. It's simply that my life's gone off in a different direction. I've had my fun. I've had my time, in the media. I mean, with the blog, I mean, it's ongoing still. I mean, conversations like this, they are such good fun. I really enjoy what I'm doing. I would have not have had these opportunities without the blog. but I am looking a few years in the line once my youngest is at secondary school. You've got to change, you've got to move on, you've got to do new things. So
yeah, you have to evolve, don't you? It's
exactly.
You mentioned something about before we went off on that tangent.
Sorry, my fault.
I made a note down because it was when I had my first boy. I was still in employment, so it was very much a case of I had 2 weeks off for maternity leave, went back, and it was as if I had been on holiday. It's like, oh, how's your time off? You have fun. It's like, well, actually, I've just had my whole life changed with this crying bundle of joy, as they call it.
Yeah.
It hasn't stopped, and I've just left my wife pretty much devastated and exhausted that I have to come and drag my ass to work.
Yeah.
So my holiday was fine, thank you very much. But then it was very much right back at it. You've done that dad thing. Now get on with your work.
Yeah.
And it's just how that is, and breaking that cycle it's incredibly difficult. I think it's going to take years, but it's going to take years of deliberately wanting it to change as well.
It is, and actually, when my first child was born, I did the usual thing as you did back in those days before shared parental leave. I took 2 weeks paternity leave. I took 2 weeks out of my own holiday. And when my second child was born, I was working part time at that point. I did the same again. 2 weeks paternity leave, 2 weeks holiday. But, and this is where I think the old-fashioned, 2 weeks paternity, where it never worked, was it assumes that mum gives birth vaginally, has a textbook delivery, and everything's absolutely fine. My child's first birth was surgical. My second child's birth actually was that textbook delivery, but then my wife's blood pressure rocketed up. There was an issue with health visitors not turning up, and she was readmitted a few days to the hospital a few days later because she had because they were worried that she had eclampsia. Spent a week basically looking at NHS Blue, those curtains, back on the ward. It does work, and when men return to work, having had a spot of be it shared parental leave or maternity leave, whatever it is, depression amongst men at that point is sky high. And I know when I went back after my daughter's first birth, I was miserable. It wasn't depression. That's a very different thing. I'm miserable to that. I didn't face too many comments about baby holidays, but we all know
that's the underlying theme, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, let's fast forward a little bit, because one thing I've found as a gap, which I can't speak about my experiences of because I don't have them, is slightly older kids. Now mine are 7.5, 5 and a bit, and 3 and a bit. And I've noticed their phases of life have changed. My relationship with them is evolving, especially with my oldest, because he's 7.5.
Yeah.
All boys. Whether that plays out differently, I don't know. But what I was really intrigued to chat about, John, is your experience as a dad of slightly older kids. I think they're 14, 13, something like that, aren't they? And it's, how do the roles and expectations change when you've got that? And what's going unsaid for other dads in your position who have got slightly older kids but don't have that space or network to chat, because rightly or wrongly, a lot of the focus is on early years parenting, especially that new dad experience. Not gonna lie, the dad's in business work, it shares my experiences. I'm not at that level of age of kids where you are, which is why I think it's really important we have a natter about it. And if you could share any experiences, gaps, opportunities that you think there are for dads with slightly older kids to talk about.
Yeah, it's something I'm absolutely passionate about. And the challenge, I would make another challenge to any dads out there, or mums actually, and book publishers. Book publishers, where's my camera? I'm talking to you. You are failing men. Go to any library or bookstore. Look on the bookshelves at the parenting books for fathers. Okay, they fall into two categories. I could name authors, but I won't get myself in all sorts of trouble. They fall into the ha ha ha, aren't fathers funny? Look at all the mistakes I've made with my children's books. Bin them, burn them, not interested, don't care, it's pure art. And then you've got the other, then you've got the more serious books that are actually, trying to offer fathers advice. You fall off the edge of a cliff at the age of 5. There are no books out there for fathers about raising older kids. So the book publishers get it right. And yeah, there are. I mean, the other point I would make is so. I think I mentioned this earlier. I mentioned this when we were talking before we came on air, Rob. When shared parental leave was introduced in 2015, I noticed a huge change in public discussion, debate around fathers. Shared parental leave itself has not been hugely successful in terms of the number of men actually taking it, but it has been supremely successful. And supremely in the discourse, debate, and recognition of fathers as caregivers. I mean, it really has increased the debate. And the point I always make is, when I became a dad, the question asked of men was, is he a hands-on dad? The question asked of men today is, how hands-on is he? Now, what does this mean also? If we look at a lot of the fatherhood support groups that have sprung up over recent years, they generally use social media to drive engagement and to get men to them. And because of the age of social media, the men that these are targeted at, the men that are actually engaging with these groups, are more often than not men with younger children. So we may see, as time goes on, these groups will actually pick up and appeal to them.
Through its natural evolution, I guess, of years. Yeah.
There could be. But for men such as myself, you can really find yourself in a rabbit in the headlights. Where the hell do I get advice on this? So if a kid actually, gets themselves an after school detention for some reason, if a child is self-harming, if you happen to know that a child is communicating on using social media with people that they shouldn't be or are unidentifiable, if kids are packing up bags and preparing to run away. Now, I'm not saying these are issues that I've actually had to deal with within my family, but these are certain issues that have been raised in discussion with others, or they have come to light.
No, absolutely. And I think, I've listened to just in my circles, both professionally and I guess socially, when those people with older kids say something's happened, if they say it at all, it's almost like they've failed. Oh, no, this has happened, therefore I failed.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. And then you maybe get speaking to one or two other parents, and you find that actually, do you know what? Such and such a kid has done something 10 times worse, or, someone has had a mirror image experience like you've had. But I would have to say those conversations I have, they happen with mums, they don't really happen with dads. And I think there will be, there's a desperate need actually for support groups and support for dads of older kids. Because if you think about it another way, there's another great blogger called Tim New who writes a blog called Slouching Towards Thatcher. Do take a look, it's a great blog. He's got kids of a similar age to mine. And the point that he has made, and he's absolutely right, is that in those early years, or those early moments of childhood, actually parents are largely facing the same challenges. Lack of sleep, potential problems of breastfeeding, when to wean. And I do want to begin, I'm talking generalizations again here. There will be those children who maybe have disabilities or developmental, no, I can't think of the words, developmental issues
Yes.
that other things would apply to. But in those early years, largely, we're all tunnel vision, we're all dealing with the same thing. Then as your kids develop their own personalities, then as they go to secondary school, and all these other influences are on them, those challenges you face, that that they can really punch you in the solar plexus. And
so what do you do when something crops up that you've this is new? how do you deal with that?
At first, if I can be honest, probably quite badly. As time has gone on, you do speak to other people and get other ideas, and suddenly realise that actually part of the process of being a tween or a teenager is going out into that world and making mistakes, and we all did it.
Yeah, it's giving the room for that to happen, right? But then,
I'm probably quite surprised people when I say this, but actually, one source that I have been able to go to once or twice has been our local church congregations. You'd be surprised who is actually involved with them, and there have been one or two issues where a little word to a priest, and before you know it, you've got sort of a teenage behavioural specialist knocking on your door because they happen to be involved and they're able to help you. So I know she's interesting. When my eldest started secondary school, and she started COVID, you have to think back, don't you? Started in 2020.
Oof, yeah.
Obviously, there was no transition. You couldn't go onto the school site. Kids hadn't been to school for months. It was actually an enterprising Church of England priest who recognised there was an issue with parents and kids not knowing each other about to start secondary school. He set up a WhatsApp group for all of the parents and for the kids to get to know each other. And I ended up organising, actually, once the restrictions had been relaxed a bit, I organised a get-together so all the parents and the kids could actually
just meet and say hello.
Before the kids started school. I will just say I was the only dad active on that WhatsApp group.
Wow. You see, a friend of mine, his daughter started secondary school, last September, and the same. It makes me frustrated that schools and society have just failed these kids so drastically because we don't know what the ramifications are going to be down the line. Now, I remember my first day secondary school and the weeks prior to that where we got phased into it. And it was, you have to go and phase yourself into it because it's different. Whereas now, because that can't happen, it's just like, you'll be fine. And we push them all into it. And it's how all this affects, when there's a lot going on with kids at that age as well, how it all is going to affect them is just confusing to me. It really is.
Well, it actually comes back to the point you asked a minute ago. I mean, I think firstly, yes, there is an issue with kids starting at secondary school during the COVID era, or even primary school. I mean, I think the reception class kids have had it just as bad. But all kids have suffered. I mean, I just wouldn't question that. And in fact, part of my Open University study is looking at the sociology of children and young people and the impact of COVID on safeguarding issues. Honestly, it's just been horrific. But for kids' social development, they are supposed to mix with kids of their own age. It's what they are, hardwired to do. And fine, we haven't had a lockdown for a few months now. For basically the best part of 12 months. 8 months of that, the kids were basically living under house arrest at home, unable to mix with the kids. I have got no concerns about my kids academically. Now, that's a very gung-ho thing to say.
No, ditto. Absolutely. Mine will catch up, I think, academically. Others won't. That for me isn't my concern. My concern is the societal.
It's a social development.
Engaging with each other. Yeah, just getting on with each other. It's and I guess it's more of a challenge, I'd assume, for kids of a slightly older age. It's Yeah, very, very unfortunate times, isn't it? But I guess just keeping an eye on time, John. What would be a good first step, do you think, to help bridge the gap from what there is now to what you think there perhaps should be for dads, primary caregivers, or dads in shared parental houses to help offer that support with older kids? What's a good first step?
Okay. Well, for primary caregiving dads, what I'd say is there are dads groups that meet up. The one thing I would say is actually they very, very often meet up on Saturday mornings or Saturday daytimes. Worst possible time for a primary caregiving dad, because you spend all week with the kids, and actually normally that's mum time. So what you're actually asking is dad to do more dad time when mum would often have the kids. So these groups should maybe look about when, Wednesday morning or something would be better for dads, in my vision. I think ultimately the best thing that could happen was for existing, and they are always called parent support groups, but by their nature they're mum support groups. Yeah. They need to be more inclusive, and it brings us back to that point I made earlier about same-sex couples. We need to make them. We need dads to be accepted in them, and we need dads. We need these groups. These groups very often do run on to sort of help and support parents when they've got older kids. Okay, I think we do need the book publishers.
Yeah, I'll point as well. There you go.
To actually get off their backsides and realise that children do grow up, and that fathers' children grow up, and actually fathers meet exactly the same challenges as mums. The ones are mentioned: eating disorders, self-harm, screen time. All these things dads are dealing with as well. Yet the books are all aimed at mums. We need to break that down.
There is definitely an air of, well, you'll be all right. You're a dad. You can go to work.
Yeah,
and this the sweeping under the carpet sort of mentality, I think, is also quite dangerous.
There is, and actually, the other point, which I've really not employers as well, and the workplace. Unfortunately, we are at a point whereby how's the baby holiday is still the kind of terminology that's used. And interestingly, Anna Whitehouse, who does the Flex Appeal campaign, she was writing on social media that she faced those same comments when she returned to work. So women face stuff too. So we all need to grow up, basically. We do need to change working culture. And I think it's interesting because I was involved in the LinkedIn Changemakers campaign last year. And I was there to promote flexible working and make it more acceptable for anyone with caring responsibilities. And as soon as it was announced I was involved, this guy got in touch with me and said, "Hey, I run diversity and inclusion training. I'm really glad to see you at your LinkedIn Changemaker." And he listed all of the diversity and inclusion training he did that his company offered. There was no diversity and inclusion training for managers when they to understand the pressures faced by men when they become fathers. But there was diversity and inclusion training for when for managers to understand when women become mothers. I actually shot straight back to this guy and said, "Where's your D&I training for the pressures faced by fathers? Not just in the early years." I should stress, because that was your question. But there are those pinch points when your kids start secondary school, when your kids do GCSEs, when your kids doing A-levels, T-levels. These are all pinch points that affect entire families. That D&I training is so that managers understand and appreciate the pressures faced by dads. It's not being done.
No.
We do need, and there is also the argument about carer leave, whether you should be able to have X number of days leave. You have got to be careful. There is a balance to be struck between business needs and parents. Working culture, working practices. I suppose post-COVID they are going to be friendlier, but they're still not
it's going to take something to force their hand, isn't it? But there's a lot of work to do, and I think if this conversation and others like it are a first small step towards helping that and raising more awareness, which I think is probably needed, then we've done our bit, I think, for this conversation. I think, John, it's been fantastic to chat, and again, I appreciate you coming on with this role and this hat and this position where you find yourself, because, like I say, I'm not that, and I think it's a very important space to have that conversation. So I really appreciate someone with so much influence coming on to have a natter about it. How can people find, connect, engage with you? Give your blog, give your LinkedIn a shout out. Tell the listeners where we can get you.
Yeah, you'll find my blog at dadbloguk.com. I am on LinkedIn. I've got a slightly old LinkedIn thing. I'm John Adams, Dad Blog UK, on LinkedIn. Do give me a follow. So I was involved in the LinkedIn Changemakers campaign last year. I was actually one of the first intake, which was fantastic to be involved with. You'll find me on most social media channels, also as at Dad Blog UK, and I have got the podcast. I've done season 1, season 2 will be coming in the future. Dad Pod UK. You'll find that on Libsyn, Apple, Google,
Spotify,
all the usual,
all your podcast platforms.
Absolutely, yes, I'm polluting all of
them. John, fantastic to chat, mate. Thank you very much, and we'll chat soon.
Like I say, it's great to be, as you say, it's good to have this conversation. Every little helps. So thanks for having me, Rob.
Good stuff. Cheers, John.